Downtown is a term primarily used in North America by English speakers to refer to a city's core or central business district, CBD, often in a geographical or commercial sense. The term is not generally used in British English, whose speakers instead use the term city centre. History. The term is thought to have been coined in New York City, where it was in use by the 1830s to refer to the original town at the southern tip of the island of Manhattan. As the town of New York grew into a city, the only direction it could grow on the island was toward the north, proceeding upriver from the original settlement. The up and down terminology coming from the customary map design in which up was north and down was south. Thus, anything north of the original town became known as Uptown, Upper Manhattan, and was generally a residential area, while the original town, which was also New York's only major center of business at the time, became known as Downtown, Lower Manhattan. During the late 19th century, the term was gradually adopted by cities across the United States and Canada to refer to the historical core of the city, which was most often the same as the commercial heart of the city. Uptown also spread, but to a much lesser extent. In both cases, though, the directionality of both words was lost, so that a Bostonian might refer to going downtown, even though it was north of where they were. Downtown lay to the south in Detroit, but to the north in Cleveland, to the east in St. Louis, and to the west in Pittsburgh. In Boston, a resident pointed out in 1880, downtown was in the center of the city. Uptown was north of downtown in Cincinnati, but south of downtown in New Orleans and San Francisco. Notably, downtown was not included in dictionaries as late as the 1880s, but by the early 1900s, downtown was clearly established as the proper term in American English for a city's central business district, although the word was virtually unknown in England and Western Europe, where expressions such as city centre, le centre de ville, el centro, and das Zentrum are used. Even as late as early part of the 20th century, English travel writers felt it necessary to explain to their readers what downtown meant. Although American downtowns lacked legally defined boundaries, and were often parts of several of the wards that most cities used as the basic functional district, locating the downtown was not difficult, as it was the place where all the street railways and elevated railways converged, and, at least in most places, where the railroad terminals were. It was the location of the great department stores, and where skyscrapers were built once that technology was perfected. It was also frequently the only part of the city that was electrified. It was also the place where street congestion was the worst, a problem for which a solution was never really found. But most of all, downtown was the place where the city did its business, inside its small precincts, sometimes as small as several hundred acres. The majority of the trading, selling, and purchasing, retail and wholesale, in the entire area would take place. There were hubs of business in other places around the city and its environs, but the downtown area was the chief one, truly the central business district. And as more and more business was done downtown, those who had their homes there were gradually pushed out, selling their property and moving to quieter residential areas uptown. The skyscraper would become the hallmark of the downtown area. Prior to the invention of the elevator, and later the high-speed elevator, buildings were limited in height to about 6 stories. Which was the de facto limit set by the amount of stairs it was assumed that people would climb. But with the elevator, that limit was shattered, and buildings began to be constructed up to about 16 stories. What limited them then was the thickness of the masonry needed at the base to hold the weight of the building above it. As the buildings got taller, The thickness of the masonry and the space needed for elevators did not allow for sufficient rentable space to make the building profitable. What shattered that restriction was the invention of first the iron and then the steel frame building, in which the building's load was carried by an internal metal frame skeleton, which the masonry simply hung off of without carrying any weight. Although first used in Chicago, the steel-framed skyscraper caught on most quickly in New York City in the 1880s, and from there spread to most other American cities in the 1890s and 1900s. The apparent lack of a height limitation of this type of building set off a fervent debate over whether their height should be restricted by law, with proponents and opponents of height limits bringing out numerous arguments in favor of their position. The question of height limits also had a profound implication for the nature of downtown itself. Would it continue to be a concentrated core, or as it grew, would height limits force it to spread out into a larger area? In the short run, the proponents of height limits were successful in their efforts. By the 1910s, most of the largest and medium-sized cities had height limits in effect, with New York, despite several concerted efforts to enact them, Philadelphia, Detroit, Pittsburgh and Minneapolis being notable holdouts. Ultimately, though, it would not be height limits per se that restricted skyscrapers, but zoning laws which would set up separate requirements for different parts of a city, and would regulate not only height, but also a building's mass, the percentage of the lot used, and the amount of light the building blocked, and would also encourage setbacks to reduce a building's bulk by allowing additional height per foot of setback, the exact amount depending on what zone the building was in. New York City was the first to do this, with the 1916 zoning resolution, which was prompted in good part by the construction of the Equitable Building in 1915, a 40-story building with straight sides and no setbacks, which raised fears of the downtown area become a maze of dark streets which never saw the sun. What was worse, at least to real estate interests, the building dumped 1.2 million square feet of office space on what was a sluggish market. To many in the real estate industry, the zoning law was an example of a reasonable restriction. Once New York had passed its law, other cities followed, and a model law, the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act of 1922, was drawn up for their guidance. Specific connotations. The typical American downtown has certain unique characteristics. During the post-war economic boom in the 1950s, the residential population of most downtowns crashed. This has been attributed to reasons such as slum clearance, construction of the interstate highway system, and white flight from urban cores to rapidly expanding suburbs. Due to well-intended but ineptly executed urban revitalization projects, downtowns eventually came to be dominated by high-rise office buildings in which commuters from the suburbs filled white-collar jobs, while the remaining residential populations sank further into unemployment, poverty, and homelessness. By the 1990s, many office-oriented businesses began to abandon the tired old downtowns for the suburbs, resulting in what are now known as edge cities. One textbook, in explaining why edge cities are so popular, stated, "The big central city comes with dirt, crime, subways, stress, congestion, high taxes, and poor public schools. Edge cities are not immune to all of these problems, especially congestion, but for now they largely avoid most of them." Since then, between 2000 and 2010, downtown areas grew rapidly in population. In U.S. metro areas with at least 5 million people, the population within 2 miles of the city hall grew twice as fast as the overall population in the metro area. Relative geographical use. The terms downtown and uptown can refer to cardinal directions. For example, In Manhattan, where downtown is also a relative geographical term, anything south of where the speaker is currently standing, in most places, is said to be downtown. Anything north of the speaker is uptown. In the common New York City phrase, "We're going to take the subway downtown," downtown refers to traveling in the geographic direction of south. A person standing on 121st Street and walking 10 blocks south could also be said to have walked 10 blocks downtown. The term uptown is used to refer to the cardinal direction north. Such concepts derive from Manhattan's elongated shape, running roughly north, south and nowhere more than 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers, wide. As such, transportation on the island travels in the uptown, downtown directions. The other boroughs are wider, and downtown there refers to Lower Manhattan, downtown Brooklyn, or some more local business district. Mercantile efforts to promote the South Bronx as downtown Bronx have met with little success. In some North American cities, downtown is the formal name of the neighborhood in which the city's central business district is located. Most major North American cities are located on major bodies of water, like oceans, lakes, and rivers. As cities expanded, people built further away from the water and the historical cores, often uphill. Thus the central business district of a North American city, or the historical core of the city, is often located down in altitude, relative to the remainder of the city. Many cities use the Manhattan model and continue to use downtown, midtown, and uptown both as informal relative geographical terms and as formal names for distinct districts. However, the city of Philadelphia uses the designation Center City, not downtown, due to the business district's central location, as well as Philadelphia's age and circumstances. Center City corresponds to the city of Philadelphia prior to its amalgamation with Philadelphia County in 1854, leaving it without a unique name. Unlike the former boroughs surrounding it, the center of the city is also where Philadelphia City Hall is located within the city's original plat. New Orleans uses the term Central Business District, or CBD, for their downtown due to the historical French Quarter District taking up what would usually be considered the city's historical downtown district, and another area of the city south of the CBD holding the downtown definition. Major downtowns: United States, Canada, downtown Calgary, downtown Edmonton, downtown Halifax, downtown Montreal, downtown Ottawa, Saint Foy Sillery Cap Rouge, Quebec City, downtown St. John's, downtown Toronto, downtown Vancouver, downtown Victoria, downtown Winnipeg. See also. Notes. Bibliography. Fogelson, Robert M. 2003. Downtown. Its Rise and Fall. 1880 to 1950. New Haven, Connecticut. Yale University Press. ISBN 0-300-09062-5. Media related to downtowns at Wikimedia Commons. The dictionary definition of downtown at Wiktionary.